When COVID-19 hit Detroit, bus service came to almost a standstill. It was cut down to a Saturday schedule, and riders were left pretty scrambling. However, in Windsor, Ontario, things looked a little different and maybe a little bit worse. Joining us today on this episode of Tapping into Transit is JC Bitonti from the advocacy group Reinstate Windsor Transit Now. JC, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Andre. Thanks for having me. Happy to collaborate with Drew.
Yeah, glad we could finally put this together through some shared colleagues. So let's get right to it. March, your group initially reached out to us, and we kind of had some conversations about transit advocacy. What was going on in Windsor around that time after COVID-19 hit?
Well, you were right to say that we were scrambling. Not long after kind of a shutdown mode reached Windsor, our mayor received a unilateral power underneath the Emergency Act to basically make a lot of unwise decisions. And some of them were helpful because, we were trying to stop the spread. But one of them was to entirely stop transit from operating. So obviously, that transit is an essential service, and a lot of our folks here were pretty concerned. So we took to the streets, so to speak, ended up within range of the legal limits for outdoor gatherings. We just staged a sit-in at the downtown transit terminal, kind of rallied all the media outlets with our chalk drawings, and spent some time there just to let the city know that there were folks who rely on transit and were pretty concerned. So yeah, that was our response. And I'm noticing the slides, and yeah, just remembering it was quite a time. Our sit-in went on for about 10 days, and a handful of us maintained that presence during daylight hours. At least once a day, there were cops around threatening to arrest us for mischief. And by the second day or third day, one thing that I wanted to loop in that was relevant to Detroit was the mayor decided to start pretty widely politicizing on Twitter and in our local media the death of the driver from DDOT over where you guys are, Jason Hargrove. So that kind of pushed us over the edge to really ramp up the presence, and we collaborated a little bit with the Motor City Freedom Riders who are connected with you guys.
Good friends, yeah.
Yeah. So it's good. It's good to be building those partnerships. Yeah.
Yeah, we're super excited to kind of get into the loop with Reinstate Windsor Transit Now, and it sounds like a lot of really creative, highly involved advocacy went into getting the word out about transit shutoffs. And I really like how you said that transit is an essential service, and there's a lot of people in the regions that rely on it. That's something that we emphasize in our messaging all the time, is transit's essential and it needs to be defended. So you did sit-ins and other various media pushes, reached out to allies. How did the situation finally end up resolving, kind of moving into the summertime?
So that shutdown actually lasted for a little over a month. We were out there, like I said, for about 10 days, and after getting all the media coverage that we ended up reeling in, we decided to call it and keep the backdrop work up. So a lot of our work was just reaching out to our local parliament, because basically all of the local members of our parliament here, which is similar to like how the Senate works in the US, I guess, was a bunch of people that knew that transit was essential. And we're really trying to like push the mayor to make a different decision. And I think by the end of that month, the provincial government had actually come through and let us know that they were making a mandate that transit services should be operated by each municipality. Because throughout the early stages of the pandemic, we were the only municipality who had entirely shut down transit. Everyone else had figured out a way to make it work. The time that we eventually got it back up was the beginning of May. So May 4th, it was about a 5-week shutdown. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't say that it was resolved. I think some of the burnout that I suffered was just noticing how the shutdown really decimated the pretty menial transit service we already had. Like one stat that I reeled up here is that of the like 21,000 pass holders that we had previously, which is not obviously accounting for folks who pay as you go, only 3,500 active passes were reinstated after that, or like were repurchased. So yeah, and I mean, it was nice that our fares didn't actually come back on until the end of October. So that gave folks quite a bit of a break through the fall months, just to still have like free service, and there was backdoor loading. But yeah, like I said, it's still really bad. Like people kind of gave up on it, and it hasn't really found its new life.
Mm-hmm. Can you speak, you spoke on, still needing some work to be done, even though service was restored, and kind of, the need that people have. In your, work in the community or your transit advocacy, could you maybe very briefly describe any real life examples of people that, riders, and how it impacted their lives, the shutdown, what people couldn't do, how the firsthand experience, how the shutdown impacted real people's lives?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's helpful to ground it in those examples, because that was definitely a lot of the emotional pull for me and folks to just make it known that there were people who were suffering. I mean, the mayor essentially told anyone and everyone that they needed to like find a different way. And of course, when you can't afford to pay for a taxi to get yourself to work, or even folks who are on like sometimes as low as $700 a month from like welfare, it's not a reasonable ask to not have work and to just spend like what little you have on like getting your essentials with a taxi. I think the thing that kind of pushed me over the edge was trying to drive around to the different stops when the shutdown originally happened, because it was within like 48 hours notice, and there was no signage put up on any of the bus shelters, because the city apparently just didn't have the staff to like do that. That was what they would say if you called. There were mostly folks like that are elders that don't have access to like looking up the updates on the internet. And one person in particular, who is now a friend of mine, her close relative was a bus driver, but the bus driver didn't actually know that transit had been shut down, because there were so many months of labor disputes happening around like who was going to do the actual cleaning, like the city staff, or were the bus drivers going to get paid the overtime that they deserved for like doing that extra labor. And the person who I ran into, she was nonverbal, so I had to like find a effective way of communicating with her to let her know that the bus she was waiting for was not going to come. And we've stayed in touch ever since, and she's part of our group. She's still like really concerned that we're still on a Saturday schedule. But I guess my hope for the future is that there was like a plan called More Than Transit that kind of started rolling out before the pandemic. Just over like 145 million in combined from like the federal, provincial, and municipal governments is supposed to go into like adding more infrastructure and improving the routes that we already have and adding more, because based on its like operating contribution per capita, we just have the lowest like ridership, and you know, that just goes to show how poorly poorly attended it is, and at no fault of ours. Like it's just it's not cost effective. Like we pay $3 a ride, and based on the amount of people that are actually riding the bus, it's just really difficult for us to make it worthwhile. So I hope that that can still roll out. I mean, I think that's where advocacy is needed in the city, is just to make sure that those plans and those funds are still implemented. So yeah.
Cool. Well, More Than Transit, keep fighting the fight, reinstating funds, reinstating service. Sounds like you yourself and your group has some strong next steps forward. If people want to find more about Reinstate Transit Now, facebook.com/we need transit. Go ahead and check that page out. They're continuing their advocacy efforts, picking up every day. And with that, I think, JC, thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode of Tapping into Transit, you can check us out more at detroittransit.org, and check out our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube channel at Detroit Transit. Again, JC, thank you so much for joining us. Anything you'd like to add before we close out here?
No, just appreciate your work over there too, and I hope that we can keep working together so that us over here find ways of establishing a more kind of grounded advocacy group, because we need to learn how to rally each other for transit. So
definitely. It's a central resource that we all need, and we all need to come together as advocates and make sure that the buses keep on rolling. So again, thank you so much, JC. And this has been Tapping into Transit. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.